Earlier, of course, we talked about the New Jersey sheriff as well as the school superintendent. And look, we know how folks feel, but a new report says racial resentment in the country spiked when Barack Obama was elected president. Oh my God! Do I see a black cat? Do I see like shocking? Shocking, really? Okay, so you look at this chart here. I don't even know what the hell it's showing, but you actually see the spike as well. Yeah, I got it, but the chart still don't make any sense. African Americans should not have special favors. Okay. According to the stats, was going down until 2008. Then African Americans have gotten more than they deserve. Was on its way up, but the trend accelerated in 2008. Okay, no shock. Conditions don't make it difficult for African Americans to get ahead. That attitude jumped after 2008. Really? Okay, no shock. The man who visualized these attitudes is sociologist Dr. LeCount of Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. Welcome to Roland Martin Unfiltered, Doc. So, look, I made a point in 2009 when I said, get ready, we're about to enter this period of white minority resentment. Where white folks in America somehow believe that black people are getting all kind of stuff. We saw polling data early on in President Obama's first term. I think it was in 2009, where 25% of Tea Partiers said he was doing more for black people than white people, which probably for black people were going, really? We are not seeing it.
Didn't get that memo.
And so, but this is not, but not only this, Thomas Edsall, the New York Times, had a piece after the election of Trump in 2016, where he went back and saw polling data after the 1984 election of Reagan over Mondale, where white voters were saying the same thing. Guess where? In places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. This view that somehow blacks are getting more. Let's just be honest that since the civil rights movement, you have white Americans who somehow believe that black people have gotten way too much because, frankly, they wanted black people to stay in their place.
There's no doubt that that's a huge part of what we're seeing here. And this study is part of a broader regimen of work focused on the racialization of politics more generally. And the point of this study is not, there's been a lot of attention to the focus on the year 1986. That's actually just the first year for which there are data available in this data set that was analyzed. But the point here is that when people come to identify as liberal or conservative white folks, their racial resentments are playing an increasing role in the formation of that identification. And what it means for white people to say, hey, I'm a liberal, or hey, I'm a conservative, is increasingly what they're thinking about this outgroup that seems to play such a big role in who they say that they are, which is really interesting.
And this is why I kept saying in the election to the people on Morning Joe and the folks on New Day and Fox and Friends, cut this BS out about, working class anxiety, because they were not talking about black people. They were talking about white folks as if somehow we are not working class. And they refused to deal with that. I remember one morning, Joe Scarborough made this comment that, since 1973, the wages of black men had gone up 12% and that of white working class being 3%. And I'm like, what the hell were the wages of white men before 1973? Right. It was so low for black people. Of course it went up.
This story that continues to get so much traction in the media that identifies the working class as white without naming that is a huge part of the problem. When people talk about the story of our present politics being about working class resentment, about downward mobility, what they're not saying, what's going unsaid, is that they're describing the working class as being white. And the point can't be made enough that the majority of working class people in the United States are people of color. And their lack of animation by these dynamics and attraction to Trump has to be otherwise explained. I should say quickly, in the study, I control for a number of economic variables. And I find that even after you try to assess people's economic station or their downward mobility, you still see that the real thing that's animating their association with their political ideology is racial resentment, is attitudes about black folks.
See, so in 2009, a study was done, I believe it was Pew, and the question was asked, are you optimistic about the future of America for your children? Every racial group was optimistic except white people. 2016, in September, the question was asked, are you optimistic about the economic future of America for the next 10 years? Black people, lowest wages, lowest wealth, highest optimism. Latinos, second lowest wealth, second highest optimism. Then Asian Americans. White Americans, highest wealth by far of anybody else. 41% said they were optimistic. And I keep telling people what is going on, this white fear, is that what has happened is they have had decades and decades and decades and decades where their children have not had to compete. And now all of a sudden, they're living in towns, that whole middle America, every time we see an election, and a huge swath of red, they're living in places where automation has killed their jobs, where the towns are drying up, military bases have shut down, and their deal is we got to blame somebody. We don't want to move, we want to stay here, and in their minds, things are going to return, and the problem is they're turning the television on, and they're saying, oh, look at that damn Colin Kaepernick making all that money, how dare he kneel? Then they're watching LeBron James. Then they're sitting criticizing Oprah for endorsing Obama. So what's happening is, I believe, these white folks are in these areas, and they're 88, 90, and 95% white. They don't even see people of color, and it's just festering, and listen to talk conservative radio all day. They watch Fox News all day, and all they're getting is those people. That's why you don't have jobs. That's why you're losing everything, and that's what's driving this. Your thoughts?
Boy, I mean, there's so much to say. I think you probably heard the idea that when you're used to privilege, equity feels like oppression. Mm-hmm. And I think that the experience of confronting the fact that society was characterized by white supremacy for most of the history of this country, and that institutions, while slowly and imperfectly, are to some extent starting to be more democratic and inclusive, for people who, especially perhaps for people who don't have those experiences with people of color, those things are experienced as threats and not as a move toward equity. And that's beginning to show up pretty clearly in our survey data. I should just add one more thing really quickly. In a lot of discussion of the study that's been out there, a lot of folks have fixated on the year 1986, which is the first year for which those data were available in this analysis. Certainly, all of us scholars of racial politics have been clear that our politics have been racialized more or less since the beginning. It's just that was the first year for which data were available in this analysis.
Last question for you.
Sure.
Do you believe that part of this problem is that national media is unwilling to drill down deep into these areas, and so therefore they're unwilling to have these level of conversations to challenge white assumptions? And I personally believe that's the case because, frankly, these newsrooms look the exact same way as many of these towns. And so when media is deathly afraid of confronting their own bigotry, their own issues when it comes to race, it's hard for them to have real honest conversations about what's happening in America because they don't want to have that mirror turned on themselves.
I think that's absolutely the case. I would refer to fellow sociologist Robin DiAngelo's brand new book called White Fragility. And when the general idea of the text is that white people lack the experience in interracial settings, and they lack the experiences of reflecting on their own privileged position, and those experiences or lack thereof engender a real difficulty coming to those conversations. And then there's a structural problem that you allude to. With our newsrooms come to look like most of the other social institutions in our society where white men are way overrepresented. And the evidence is very clear that when you have those circumstances, you get echo chambers where you don't have people who are sitting in the room to say, maybe we need to have some attention to this thing that's an issue of major concern for a huge proportion of the society, because those people aren't aware of it. So democratization of our media system is an important thing as well.
All right. Well, Doc, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And I'm going to be sure to email some of those folks at other newsrooms to say, y'all want to have a real conversation and stop talking about Trump and Kavanaugh all damn day? Why don't you have this discussion? Let's see what they have to say.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much.